Captain Vex of the Tannery Republic stood in the communications center of his flagship Harmony watching the holographic displays that showed the systematic destruction of his people's frontier colonies. The bridge around him buzzed with desperate activity as his communications officers worked frantically to establish contact with their allies while avoiding the raider patrols that had cut off most of their usual channels. The sight on the tactical screens was heartbreaking. New Geneva Colony, home to 50,000 tannery families, was nothing but cooling debris orbiting a dead planet. Port Serenity, which had housed their most advanced research facilities, now existed only as scattered wreckage drifting through space. 6 colonies destroyed in as many days, with the raiders moving through tannery space like a plague of destruction. "Sir, we've confirmed loss of contact with Paradise Station," reported his communications officer, Lieutenant Kira, her voice barely steady. "Long-range sensors show no life signs. The raiders hit their evacuation transports before they could escape." Vex closed his eyes, feeling the weight of every life lost. The Tannery were peaceful people, scholars and traders who had spent centuries building a civilization based on cooperation and knowledge-sharing. They had defensive ships, but they were designed for deterring pirates and managing traffic accidents, not fighting organized military campaigns by savage raiders who seemed to take pleasure in destruction. The raiders themselves were a mystery that terrified every civilized species in their sector. They appeared without warning in ships that looked like they'd been cobbled together from the wreckage of 100 different civilizations. Their vessels bristled with mismatched weapons, and their crews seemed to consist of beings from dozens of different species united only by the love of violence and destruction. "Captain, we're receiving another transmission from the Outer Rim settlements," announced his tactical officer, Commander Rill. "The raiders are demanding tribute from the agricultural worlds. They are threatening to begin orbital bombardment if payment isn't received within 12 hours. The agricultural worlds were defenseless, peaceful farming communities that supplied food to half the sector. They had no weapons, no shields, no way to protect themselves from raiders who treated civilian slaughter as entertainment." Vex moved to the central communication console, knowing that their only hope lay with their longtime allies. The Tannery Republic had been part of the Hegemony Defense Alliance for over 2 centuries, contributing their advanced sensor technology and trade networks to the mutual defense agreement that protected dozens of peaceful civilizations. "Open priority channel to Hegemony Defense Command," Vex ordered, activating the secure military frequencies that connected allied governments across their region of space. "Maximum encryption, full diplomatic protocols." The communication system established connection through a network of relay stations that spanned multiple star systems, routing the message through a complex infrastructure that kept allied civilizations in contact across vast distances. What Vex didn't know was that routine maintenance on the primary relay hub had redirected traffic through a backup station that had been abandoned for decades. "Priority transmission to Hegemony Defense Command," Vex broadcast, his voice carrying the formal tone required for military emergency protocols. "This is Captain Vex, commanding the Tannery Defense Fleet. Tannery frontier colonies are under systematic attack by organized raider forces. We have confirmed destruction of 6 major settlements with civilian casualties exceeding 300,000. Request immediate peacekeeping intervention under Mutual Defense Protocols Article 7. The message included detailed tactical data about the raider attacks, civilian casualty reports, and intelligence about the enemy fleet composition. Everything was formatted according to Hegemony military standards, designed to trigger their careful but effective response procedures. Vex settled back to wait for the familiar response from Hegemony diplomats. He knew their process well. The message would be analyzed by committee, discussed in parliamentary sessions, and debated by diplomatic corps who would spend weeks crafting the perfect response. Eventually, they would deploy a small peacekeeping fleet with strict rules of engagement designed to minimize casualties while encouraging negotiated settlements. It was a slow process, but it had kept peace in their region for generations. The Hegemony believed in measured responses, careful diplomacy, and solutions that addressed root causes rather than simply applying military force. Vex respected their approach, even though it meant waiting while more of his people died. What he got instead was a response that arrived within 4 hours, transmitted on military frequencies with crisp professional authority that cut through space like a blade. Message intercepted. Hostile action against civilian targets confirmed. This is Admiral Patricia Wells, Terran Defense Command. Fleet deploying immediately. Provide tactical data on raider positions and maintain clear space lane for our arrival. Vex stared at the communication display, confused by the unfamiliar terminology. Terran Defense Command wasn't in any of his databases, and the response was far more direct than anything he'd ever received from hegemony officials. So, Lieutenant Kira said, reviewing the message details, the transmission origin shows routing through the old Sigma-7 relay station. It might be a hegemony subdivision using updated communication protocols. Vex assumed she was correct. The response had a professional military tone he associated with hegemony forces, and the speed suggested they were taking the crisis seriously. Perhaps they'd finally developed more efficient decision-making procedures. He had absolutely no idea that his desperate plea for help had been rerouted through abandoned infrastructure to reach a species that treated attacks on innocent civilians as personal insults requiring immediate overwhelming retaliation. The beings who'd received his message didn't debate response protocols or form committees to discuss diplomatic solutions. They just loaded their weapons and headed straight for the fight. Admiral Patricia Wells sat in the Strategic Command Center at Terra Military Headquarters, surrounded by holographic displays that showed real-time intelligence feeds from across the galaxy. The facility operated around the clock, with human intelligence networks monitoring thousands of communication channels for threats to civilian populations. When the Tannery distress call arrived through the automated intercept systems, it triggered immediate priority alerts across her command center. We're receiving a priority civilian threat assessment, announced Commander Lisa Davis from her station at the Intelligence Coordination Hub. Organized raider attacks against defenseless colonies. Multiple confirmed civilian casualties in the hundreds of thousands. Wells immediately pulled up the full intercept data on her command console, reviewing the tactical information that painted a clear picture of systematic violence against innocent people. The raiders weren't just attacking military targets. They were deliberately targeting civilian settlements, agricultural colonies, and research stations filled with families who had no way to defend themselves. This is exactly the kind of situation our monitoring networks were designed to detect, Wells said to her staff, activating the emergency response protocols that would mobilize humanity's rapid intervention capabilities. Someone is conducting organized warfare against civilian populations. That makes it our problem. The human approach to galactic monitoring was unique among known civilizations. While most species focused their intelligence gathering on military threats to their own territories, humanity had developed comprehensive networks specifically designed to detect threats to civilian populations anywhere within their operational range. It was a philosophy born from Earth's violent history, the understanding that organized violence against innocents was a cancer that spread if left untreated. Colonel Robert Turner, Wells called to her ground forces commander, who was reviewing deployment options at his tactical station. We have pirates systematically targeting civilian settlements. I want the 7th Fleet ready for immediate deployment within 6 hours. Turner activated his communication links to Lunar Base, Mars Command, and the outer system staging areas where humanity's rapid response forces maintain constant readiness. All battalion commanders, this is Colonel Turner. Priority deployment authorized. We're dealing with organized raider activity against civilian targets. Full anti-piracy protocols are in effect. The 7th Fleet represented humanity's most specialized civilian protection capability, 250 warships designed specifically for rapid deployment and counter-piracy operations. These weren't exploration vessels or diplomatic ships. They were purpose-built military platforms designed to hunt down and eliminate threats to innocent people wherever they might be found in the galaxy. President Michael Johnson received the emergency briefing at the White House within an hour of the initial intercept, surrounded by his national security team who treated attacks on civilian populations as automatically requiring American military response, regardless of which star system was involved. What are we looking at? Johnson asked Secretary of Defense Patricia Ross during the secure briefing. Organized raider activity against peaceful colonies, Russ replied, showing satellite imagery of destroyed settlements and detailed casualty reports. Multiple worlds hit, systematic targeting of defenseless populations. Classic piracy escalated to genocidal levels. Johnson's authorization was immediate and comprehensive. Operation Shield Wall is approved. Complete elimination of raider threats and establishment of permanent security for the affected colonies. Use whatever resources are necessary. Major Jennifer Hay coordinated Marine Battalion deployment from the Orbital Command Center above Earth, overseeing the loading of specialized equipment designed specifically for counter-piracy operations in hostile environments. Her forces had trained for exactly this scenario: organized criminals preying on civilian populations in remote locations where local authorities couldn't provide adequate protection. Standard anti-raider protocols for all units, Hayes announced during the final deployment briefing. Remember, these aren't military targets engaged in legitimate warfare. They are criminals preying on innocent families. We're not here to negotiate or establish diplomatic solutions. We're here to eliminate a criminal organization that targets civilians. The distinction was crucial to the human military mindset. Legitimate military conflicts involve complex political considerations, rules of engagement designed to minimize casualties, and diplomatic solutions that addressed underlying causes. Criminal activity against civilian populations required a completely different approach. Immediate overwhelming force applied until the threat was permanently eliminated. Captain William Brooks prepared his fighter squadrons at the Mars Orbital Yards, overseeing the deployment of spacecraft specifically designed for hunting pirates through hyperspace. His pilots were specialists in pursuit operations, trained to track criminal organizations across multiple star systems and eliminate them using techniques that most galactic civilizations didn't know existed. Load the full hunter-killer package. Brooks ordered his squadron leaders: long-range pursuit systems, hyperspace interdiction equipment, and enough firepower to disable any civilian vessel without destroying it. We want prisoners for intelligence processing. The human approach to anti-piracy warfare had been refined through centuries of fighting organized crime in the outer colonies, where pirates regularly preyed on isolated settlements and cargo ships traveling through remote systems. The techniques developed for protecting human civilians had proven effective against every form of organized criminal activity humanity had encountered. Commander Diana Foster coordinated the intelligence analysis that would guide the operation, processing the intercepted tannery data to identify raider movement patterns, supply lines, and command structures. These raiders operate like the criminal syndicates we've dealt with in the outer territories, she reported. Decentralized command structure, mixed species crews, tactics focus on intimidating civilian targets rather than fighting professional military forces. To humans, protecting civilians from organized violence wasn't diplomacy requiring careful negotiation and measured responses. It was moral obligation requiring immediate military action by professionals trained specifically for eliminating threats to innocent people. The human fleet that departed for Tannery Space carried the determination of law enforcement officers responding to crimes in progress, equipped with weapons and training designed to ensure that criminal organizations targeting civilians would be permanently eliminated rather than temporarily discouraged. They weren't going to negotiate with pirates. They were going to arrest or eliminate them. Captain Vex stood in the observation deck of his flagship Harmony *, monitoring the long-range sensors for any sign of the measured hegemony response he expected. For 3 days, he'd watched the displays showing raider movements through Tannery Space, each enemy formation growing bolder as they realized no immediate relief was coming for the defenseless colonies. "Any word from Hegemony Command?" he asked his communications officer, though he already knew the answer. The Hegemony's careful diplomatic process typically took weeks to produce results: committee meetings to analyze the situation, parliamentary debates about appropriate response levels, and careful negotiations with all involved parties before deploying limited peacekeeping forces. "Still processing our request through diplomatic channels," Lieutenant Kira reported. "Standard procedure indicates we should expect preliminary response protocols within 10 to 14 days. Vex nodded grimly. The Hegemony's approach had kept peace in their region for centuries, but it required patience that his dying people didn't have. Already, the raiders had moved beyond the outer colonies and were threatening the agricultural world that fed half their sector. "So, we're detecting massive hyperspace distortions on the edge of the system," announced Commander Rill from the sensor station, his voice carrying unusual excitement. "Multiple contacts incoming. Very large signatures." Through the observation deck's transparent aluminum, Vex could see the first signs of arrival, points of light that grew brighter as massive vessels dropped out of hyperspace with mathematical precision. But these weren't the familiar, graceful curves of Hegemony ships with their diplomatic white hulls and peaceful configuration. Instead, space around Tannery Prime filled with angular human warships that move with predatory efficiency. The vessels were dark, functional, and covered with sensor arrays and weapon systems that spoke of serious military purpose. They deployed in formations that created overlapping fields of fire while establishing complete control over every approach to the system. Admiral Wells' flagship Defender emerged from hyperspace like a small city made of metal and determination. The massive dreadnought was larger than anything in Tannery space, its hull bristling with equipment that the Tannery sensors couldn't identify. Behind it came wave after wave of human warships, destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and specialized vessels that move with the coordination of a pack hunting prey. How many ships? Vex whispered, staring at displays that showed over 200 distinct contacts deploying across his star system with military precision. The sensors are still counting, Real replied, his voice filled with amazement. They are establishing complete coverage of the entire system. Every planet, every moon, every asteroid belt is being monitored by human forces. Admiral Wells' voice cut through the communication channels with professional authority that brooked no argument. Tannery Command, this is Admiral Patricia Wells of the Terran Defense Fleet. We're here to eliminate the pirate threat. Provide us with all available radar position data and maintain clear space lanes for our combat operations. The transmission was direct, efficient, and completely different from the careful diplomatic language Vex was accustomed to hearing from the hegemony. There were no negotiations, no discussions of political implications, no requests for meetings or preliminary talks. Just professional military forces announcing their intention to solve the problem through overwhelming force. Admiral Wells, Vex responded, still trying to process what he was witnessing. We weren't expecting such a comprehensive response. Are you affiliated with the Hegemony Defense Corps? Negative. We intercepted your distress call and responded under humanitarian intervention protocols. Transmit all tactical data on radar positions immediately. We're beginning combat operations in 30 minutes. Captain William Foster led human fighter squadrons that launched from carrier vessels with the efficiency of industrial machinery. The fighters moved through space using pursuit techniques that the Tannery didn't know existed, quantum tracking systems that could follow hyperspace trails, sensor networks that could detect cloaked vessels, and coordination systems that allowed hundreds of craft to operate as a single hunting pack. Multiple radar formations detected in the outer system. Foster reported over tactical channels, beginning systematic elimination of hostile forces. All civilian traffic maintained minimum safe distance from combat zones. The human fleet didn't negotiate or issue warnings to the raiders. They simply began eliminating every hostile force in Tannery space with surgical precision that turned combat into industrial processing. Human weapons locked onto raider vessels with targeting systems that could distinguish between pirates and legitimate shipping from impossible distances. Major Jennifer Hayes coordinated ground operations that established secure zones around every Tannery population center, while hunter-killer teams pursued raider landing parties that had been terrorizing civilian settlements. Standard counter-piracy protocols in effect. These criminals are operating in our area of responsibility now. The systematic efficiency was terrifying to witness. Within hours, raider groups that had terrorized the Tannery frontier for months found themselves hunted by humans who treated piracy as a capital crime requiring immediate punishment. The pirates who had built their reputation on attacking defenseless civilians suddenly faced professional soldiers who'd been perfecting anti-piracy warfare for decades. Commander Lisa Roberts tracked raider movements through hyperspace using technology that made their stealth systems useless. Enemy formations are attempting to retreat to deep space, deploying interdiction fields. No hostile vessel leaves the system until we process them for intelligence. The human approach was methodical and overwhelming. They didn't just fight the raiders. They systematically dismantled their entire operational capability, using techniques that treated organized crime as a problem requiring complete elimination rather than temporary discouragement. Captain Vex watched from his command center as human forces transformed his crisis from desperate survival into what appeared to be routine law enforcement operations. The beings he'd accidentally contacted didn't approach piracy as a diplomatic problem requiring careful negotiation. They treated it as crime requiring immediate arrest or elimination of the perpetrators. The humans implemented what they called comprehensive anti-piracy protocols with a methodical precision of law enforcement professionals who'd been perfecting these techniques for decades. Major Lisa Roberts stood in the boarding bay of the assault ship Justice, watching her team prepare for what will become the most systematic dismantling of organized crime the galaxy had ever witnessed. All boarding teams. Standard law enforcement procedures are in effect, Roberts announced through the Tactical Communication Network. We're not here to destroy these vessels. We need them intact for intelligence processing. Disable their ships, arrest all survivors, extract every piece of data they have, then trace their entire operational network back to its source. The human approach to anti-piracy warfare was fundamentally different from anything the Tannery had imagined possible. Instead of simply driving off the raiders or destroying their ships, the humans treated each encounter as part of a comprehensive criminal investigation designed to eliminate the threat permanently. Captain William Thompson commanded the specialized boarding craft that approached the first raider vessel, a converted cargo hauler bristling with mismatched weapons and crude armor plating. The raider ship had been disabled by precise electromagnetic pulses that shut down its engines and weapons while leaving life support and computer systems intact. Target vessel is secured, Thompson reported as his boarding team prepared to breach the hull. Detecting 43 life signs aboard. Standard detention protocols are ready for implementation. The boarding operation unfolded with professional efficiency that turned combat into police work. Human Marines in powered armor cut through the raider ship's hull using plasma torches, then deployed non-lethal suppression weapons that incapacitated the crew without causing permanent damage. Within minutes, the entire raider crew was in restraints while human technicians began extracting data from their computer systems. Intelligence harvest is proceeding, reported Lieutenant Commander Patricia Hay from her analysis station aboard the Justice. We're pulling navigation logs, communication records, financial transactions, and personnel files. These pirates kept detailed records of their operations. The raiders, accustomed to fighting frightened colonists with outdated weapons and no military training, found themselves completely outmatched by human military specialists who'd been studying organized crime in space for generations. Every tactic the pirates used, ambush attacks, intimidation, hit-and-run raids, had been encountered and countered by human forces dealing with similar criminals in the outer colonies. Major Roberts personally interrogated the raider captain, a scarred alien who'd built his reputation on terrorizing defenseless settlements. You're going to tell us about your supply lines, your bases, your command structure, and every operation you conducted in this sector, she informed him with the calm authority of someone who'd processed hundreds of similar criminals. You can't do this, the pirate captain protested. We have rights under galactic law. You lost those rights when you started murdering civilians, Roberts replied coldly. You're facing charges of genocide, piracy, and crimes against sapient species. Cooperation might get you a life sentence instead of execution. Captain David Anderson coordinated the broader operation from his command ship Vigilant Asterisk, establishing coordination protocols with Tannery authorities while human forces systematically hunted down every raider group in their territory. His teams worked with local officials to establish permanent patrol networks that would prevent future criminal activity. Captain Vex, Anderson explained during their daily briefing, we're not just stopping these current raids. We're implementing security measures that will make this sector uninhabitable for organized crime. Permanent sensor networks, regular patrol schedules, and rapid response protocols that can deploy overwhelming force within hours of detecting hostile activity. The human security network being established around Tannery Space represented technology that most galactic civilizations didn't know existed. Quantum sensor arrays that could track ships through hyperspace, automated monitoring systems that could distinguish between legitimate traffic and potential threats, and communication networks that could summon military response from multiple star systems simultaneously. Commander Jennifer Foster led the intelligence analysis teams that processed data from captured raider vessels, mapping the criminal network with forensic precision. We've identified their main supply base, 17 subsidiary operations, and over 300 individuals involved in the organization, she reported. Standard criminal network structure, decentralized operations reporting to a central command authority. The systematic dismantling of the raider networks proceeded with industrial efficiency. Each captured ship provided intelligence that led to more targets, each arrested pirate revealed additional criminal operations, and each liberated colony provided evidence that helped build comprehensive criminal cases against the surviving raiders. Major Robert Turner coordinated the final phase of the operation, simultaneous strikes against every identified raider base within 300 light-years of Tannery space. All teams, this is a final sweep. We're hitting their entire infrastructure simultaneously so none of them can escape to rebuild elsewhere. The coordinated assault eliminated the raider threat so completely that within 2 weeks, organized piracy had essentially ceased to exist in their region of the galaxy. The pirates who survived found themselves in human detention facilities awaiting trial for crimes against civilian populations, while their ships and equipment were being processed as evidence in the largest criminal case in galactic history. Captain Diana Mitchell filed the final operational report with satisfaction. Criminal organization eliminated. All identified pirates captured or neutralized. Permanent security network established. Sector is now protected against future organized crime through comprehensive monitoring and rapid response capabilities. By the end of the operation, the pirates weren't just defeated, they were extinct as an organized threat. The humans had treated piracy like a law enforcement problem requiring professional criminals to face professional soldiers, and the results spoke for themselves. The galaxy's most dangerous raider network had been reduced to prison inmates and scrap metal through methods that most civilizations considered impossible. 3 months after the systematic elimination of the raider threat, Captain Vex toured Tannery space aboard the human patrol vessel Guardian, marveling at the comprehensive transformation that had taken place throughout their territory. The space lanes that had once been hunting ground for organized criminals were now bustling with merchant traffic protected by an integrated defense network that made piracy essentially impossible. The coverage is remarkable, Vex observed to Commander Lisa Foster, his human escort for the inspection tour. Through the viewport, he could see the orbital monitoring stations that sparkled like technological stars around every inhabited world, their sensors capable of tracking individual ships across multiple star systems simultaneously. Foster consulted her tablet showing the real-time security status of the entire sector. Standard post-intervention protocols. We established permanent monitoring networks, automated response systems, and rapid deployment capabilities to ensure criminal organizations can never re-establish themselves in protected territory. The transformation was comprehensive in ways that still amazed the Tannery leadership. Human engineers had rebuilt their defense infrastructure with technology that was generations ahead of anything they possessed before the crisis. Automated patrol networks covered every trade route, while early warning systems could detect potential threats from neighboring sectors before they became dangerous. What impressed Vex most was how the humans had treated the reconstruction not just as a security wedge, but as an opportunity to upgrade Tannery civilization's entire approach to spatial traffic management. Their shipping lanes now incorporated human-designed safety protocols that could handle any emergency from mechanical failure to hostile action. The automated response systems you've implemented, Foster explained as they reviewed the patrol schedules, can deploy intervention forces to any point in your territory within 6 hours. Criminal activity gets detected, tracked, and eliminated before it can threaten civilian populations. Admiral Patricia Wells met them at the new Joint Command Center that had been established as the central coordination point for security operations throughout Tannery space. The facility was a marvel of human military engineering, a space station that could coordinate defense operations across dozens of star systems while serving as a hub for legitimate commercial and diplomatic traffic. Admiral Wells, Vex said during their final meeting in her office overlooking the bustling traffic control operations, "I need to address something that's been bothering me. We never intended to contact your people 3 months ago. Our original distress call was meant for the Hegemony Defense Corps." Wells smiled with the expression of someone who'd heard similar stories from other species. "We know, Captain. Our intelligence analysis determined that your message was accidentally routed through an abandoned relay station. We intercepted your call by complete accident." She activated a holographic display showing the communication routing that had led to their intervention. But attacks on civilian populations trigger automatic military intervention, regardless of political boundaries or original intentions. That's just standard operating procedure for human forces. The casual way she discussed their massive military intervention as routine procedure continued to amaze Vex. What his people had considered an unprecedented crisis, humans treated as Tuesday afternoon police work requiring professional response. "Your people mobilized the largest fleet in galactic history for beings you'd never met," Vex noted. "Why would you take such risk for strangers?" Because organized violence against civilian populations is everyone's problem, Wells replied matter-of-factly. When criminals target innocent families, it becomes a threat to civilization itself. We learned long ago that ignoring such threats just allows them to spread. As if summoned by cosmic timing, the Hegemony Defense Corps finally arrived with their diplomatic delegation, only to find the crisis completely resolved by beings who approach civilian protection as a non-negotiable principle. The Hegemony ships, elegant, diplomatic vessels designed for careful negotiation, looked almost quaint compared to the efficient human patrol networks that had eliminated piracy from the entire sector. Ambassador Kellyan of the Hegemony Defense Corps met with Admiral Wells in what became a somewhat awkward diplomatic encounter. "Admiral, we appreciate your intervention, but the Tannery Republic is under our mutual defense agreements. Perhaps we should discuss proper protocols for future incidents." "Of course," Wells replied diplomatically, "but our standard operating procedures require immediate response to civilian distress calls regardless of existing political arrangements. We'll be happy to coordinate with your forces for future operations." The transformation was indeed complete. Pirates avoided Tannery space entirely now, knowing it was protected by humans who treated criminal activity against civilians as a personal affront requiring immediate violent correction. The sector had gone from being a hunting ground for organized crime to being one of the safest regions in their part of the galaxy. But the implications extended far beyond Tannery territory. Word of humanity's accidental but effective intervention had spread throughout civilized space, creating a new understanding of how galactic security could actually work when someone was willing to take decisive action. Captain Robert Davis, commanding the permanent human patrol force in Tannery space, reviewed the communication requests that arrived daily at his headquarters. "The Crystal Federation is routing distress calls through our networks. The Peaceful Alliance want to establish communication links with our monitoring systems. The agricultural worlds are requesting direct access to our emergency response protocols." The pattern was spreading as species throughout the galaxy learned that human communication networks monitor for civilian distress calls as standard procedure, creating accidental first responders who treated piracy and organized violence as crimes against civilization itself. Major Jennifer Thompson, coordinating the expanding human security network, filed reports that showed the scope of what had become a new model for galactic law enforcement. Current coverage. Human monitoring networks are processing emergency communication from 4 to 7 different species. Response time to civilian threats has decreased from months to hours across multiple sectors. Other civilizations began deliberately routing their distress calls through human networks, discovering that sometimes the wrong recipient provided exactly the right solution: immediate, overwhelming, and permanent elimination of threats to innocent people. Commander Diana Hayes, overseeing the communication networks that had made humanity accidental guardians of galactic civilian populations, observed the cultural shift taking place. "We're not just solving individual crises anymore. We're changing how the galaxy thinks about protecting civilian populations. Species are starting to expect immediate response to threats rather than accepting them as inevitable." Captain Vex filed his final report to the Tannery Council with a sense of wonder at what his misdirected plea for help had unleashed. "We sent a distress call to the wrong recipients and received the right solution. Humanity didn't just save us. They created a new standard for what civilized species expect when innocent people are threatened."